Good afternoon, gentlemen. As always, again, for full attendance, we'll need to be on camera for this class and all classes. You should still, even on days where you are not able to be on camera, you're still encouraged to attend. But I think for full engagement, we want to be visible. But we'll go through the lecture in any regard. I was able to create a YouTube channel for this class. I'm still having trouble uploading the lectures onto e-learning. I'm going to attempt to continue to do that because I prefer everything to be in one place. But I have created a YouTube page, and I'll email you all the link for that. The first lecture is already posted. So I'll send that to you, and I'll post this lecture immediately after class here today. So throughout the semester, again, you're encouraged to come to class during time, our normal time, in case you have any questions or need any direct feedback on anything. But it'll be available for you throughout the semester. So do keep this in mind. I apologize for the confusion as it relates to the textbook. You should have that available to you in the library now. So if you have any trouble with that, Ms. Clark did say it was available. So if you do have any trouble, let me know. You're not too far behind yet. Chapter 1 is a very brief chapter. So quite frankly, if you're able to get in there over the next couple of days, you should be able to get this chapter done by the time that we meet on Monday. But let's go ahead and get into it. As always, we try and summarize some of the more important points. As always, you're encouraged to take notes as we go through the lecture. If you're not able to, I really encourage you to do this later. And really take time to look at the notes and don't just try and memorize the information, but to try and truly get an understanding of the concepts and why they're important and how they connect to one another. So when we talked about urbanism again, it just speaks to, again, living in large major cities. This, through most of human history, Stephen, this hasn't been the case. I think you did, Steve. I'm not sure if either of you all took intro to sociology with me, principles of sociology rather. But in that class, we talked about the different types of societies. That's where we talked about pastoralism, hunter and gathering societies, agriculture-based societies, horticultural societies, industrial and post-industrial. We'll talk about those in more detail. But what do you think? And don't worry if you don't know this. What do you think is a common thread that informs how societies are structured? Like, how do human beings determine that we're going to set up our society this way? What do you think is the most important, the first thing that we consider more than anything else?
I guess who's going to lead the way?
Nope.
Would you say it's the morals and rules we learn in the household on like how we conduct ourselves?
No. So the basic human needs. What are our basic human needs? That before we can start to even think about all that stuff, what's the first thing that we gotta figure out as human beings? The first people are born millions of years ago. What's the first thing they gotta try and figure out?
Go ahead, Stephen. Go ahead.
Oh my bad. I say find food and water.
Absolutely. Excellent, Stevie. Yep. So, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Charles.
Would shelter be another one as well?
Not yet. Nah.
Okay, not yet. Okay, gotcha.
If you know, like if I'm in here and I got shelter, but I ain't got nothing to eat, that ain't the greatest situation. Obviously, shelter is really important. You're right.
Yes, sir.
But through early human history, that wasn't even an important consideration. Food and water. Food and water. Stephen, I asked this question because this is important to understand. Like, every society is based upon that. Like, how do we figure that out? How do we get our food and water? Then once you get that figured out, only then can you advance to all the other stuff. And we're going to talk about that in great detail. So I say all that to say that most of human history was really just focused on that. How are we finna eat today? Where are we going to get our water sources from? as a result, Stephen, like a large amount of like our history has been spent on farming. Like as societies begin to develop, people began to farm a lot. Like, that was the main work that people did as recently as 150 years ago. So when you hear of a North Carolina A&T, when you hear of a Texas A&M, the A in there is agriculture, because they were teaching people not to become like, it wasn't as important to become like a pet psychiatrist or a clinical therapist or an industrial engineer. They needed farmers. So through most of human history, Charles, human beings lived in that type of environment where they grew and produced their own food. Before we get to farming, you had hunting and gathering. And that's exactly what it sounds like, where Stephen, people would gather things that came naturally. They would gather like, fruit and berries from trees and stuff like that. So going and picking up apples and oranges. And then other people would go in like hunt bison, buffalo, whatever they may have eaten back in the day. I'm not a hunter myself, but and this ain't no like, high tech, weaponry type stuff. They have to get up on these animals like, So it was very like, dangerous work. And if, I'm not sure, again, you all are Southern boys, although I know a lot of hunters up north, quite frankly. But I'm not sure if you all have hunted before, but if you have, you'll know that even with modern technology, it's not easy.
No, it's not.
Like you can go out there sometimes, even with everything, all the advantages that we got in the 21st century, and you might come back with nothing. Animals is slick.
Yeah.
So with this in mind, right, hunting back in the day where you might just have like a boulder or something, or like, some rudimentary tool, it's very difficult. So you may not be able to like really get a big kill for a long time. Like it might be weeks on end. And when you did, it was just like, yes, it was great. But because of that, Charles, because you didn't know when you were going to eat, how do you think that informed people's choices?
When you mean inform their choices, like you talking about like basically like after they got the kill, like how they would ration out the food, or like when they would go hunt?
So for you as an individual,
Yes, sir.
if you, Charles, whether we're talking about 50,000 years BC or whether we're talking about 2021, if you're not able to, if you're not sure if you can eat today, like on a basic level,
right?
ain't talking about eating good where like, man, I'd rather have Chick-fil-A than cafeteria food. I'm talking about if you don't know if you can eat and you don't know if you're going to be able to find food next week, the week after that, how do you think that might impact your personal choices? How do you, in terms of planning for the future, let me ask it that way.
I would be, I guess, more cautious on how much food I intake.
You would? What else?
I guess you would like
and you can weigh in, Stephen. You can weigh in, Stephen. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I think you would pay attention on how much food you consume, so you could save it throughout the week or a month.
That's for sure. How would it affect your your family choices?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Would you be trying to add on to the family?
No, you wouldn't.
Because again, if you don't know, like now, right? Like, I would imagine at some point y'all probably want to be fathers, but you probably holding off until you get a little bit more resources, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Because it's tough taking care of you right now. How the hell are you finna be trying to take care of somebody else? That's not fair to that child. So these are been the calculations all across human history. So I ask you all these questions because the populations during these times, Stephen, were very small. People say the small groups. And they did it for one basic reason. You didn't know when you was going to eat again. Like, so, and people originally, when human beings first started emerging, Like they travel like, you know, it might be a pack of like 20 group and you have to stay on the move. Why? Why would people have to stay on the move?
Because the I guess you could say the climate was constantly changing and
Wait, to add on what you're talking about, not with the climate, but didn't animals like the buffalo and stuff, like they would travel, because of the climate, but they would have to follow behind the animals. So the animals
Absolutely. Exactly. Excellent, Charles. They went where the food was at, dog. So for one, the animals would travel, and then two, again, if y'all have hunted before, sometimes hunters get too good. So you may hunt in Mecklenburg County for like a period of 2-3 years, and you're hunting deer, you're hunting elk, you're hunting wild turkey, and over 3 years you become so good, all the population dries up. Like it ain't if you stay here, the population of wild turkey has gotten so diminished because y'all have hunted them so much, Stevie. I've been eating good over these 3 years. But y'all have hunted so well that they have not repopulated enough. So now you got to go over to the next county and try and get some food there. It might be a lake there. You fish for a couple of years. You fish so good. Damn. Now the fishing dried up. Now you got to keep going to another place. Now you're right, Stephen. That sometimes climate can impact that as well. That if there's a drought that kills all the animals or dries up a lake, that can definitely impact it. But the bottom line to that is that people were going to go where the food was at. So you stayed in small groups because you didn't know when you were going to eat again. And you stayed constantly on the move because you didn't know when your food source was going to be able to develop. And if you stayed in one place for too long, you would starve. Mm-hmm. I say all of this, right, because again, this type of dynamic that I talked about defined most of human history. It wasn't until we began to learn how to farm, Stephen, that people could begin, like one of the reasons, like, so we talk about revolutions, right? What's a revolution? When you hear that word, what does that mean? Revolution. We hear that word a lot, but what does it mean?
The first thing that comes to my mind is like a uprising.
Potentially. But if you were one word, what would you use to define revolution? One word.
Revolt? I don't know.
Change. Like not all revolutions have to be violent or uprising. So for example, right, we are living in the post-industrial revolution, also called like the technological revolution, where technology has become so important in our society that once like the microchip came into society, like so the whole planet was never the same again. So when revolutions come into play, so revolutions mean, and we talk about social revolutions, Stephen, it's where things are totally different from this point on. So one of the major human revolutions was the agricultural revolution, This is where people first learned to farm. Before Charles to get their food, people had to travel, they had to kill animals, they had to again hope that there were enough oranges and apples on the tree. But now with farming, we can do several things. We can plan and project. So now, as opposed to like, man, I don't know if it's going to be enough lion here for us to eat next year. Now, Stephen, you can say, okay, look, we're going to plant 200 yams. We're going to plant some corn. We're going to grow some okra. And this way we can know that I will have this, like how you said before, Stephen, you might have to plan and map out and kind of conserve how much you're going to eat. Now, you can predict what you're going to eat. We're going to put this in the lake. We're going to harvest these seeds. And then we're going to, again, like, once they reap in several months, we'll be able to, like, bear the fruits of that. Mm-hmm. So in this regard, right, now that you can predict your food source, Charles, and you can control it to a degree, you can, if you want to have 2 or 3 more kids, Charles, you can go ahead and do your thing. Why? Because you know for sure how much you'll be able to eat. And now that you got this whole food thing worked out, right? Now you can do all types of stuff. So think about it like this. Again, we're like, one of the reasons why America is such an advanced country is that even amongst like really poor people, like people have enough to survive, and by doing that, you can do things like go to school and stuff like that. In many countries across the world, that's a luxury. Like 6, 7, 8-year-old kids in Asia and Africa, they ain't going to school. They gotta like find some way to feed their families today. In this country, you can put off again, like you can kind of like hold off for 4 or 5 years as you develop your skills, and then you get big money to feed your family at the end of that. But that's only because we have enough basic resources. Now, we talked about food. Is food the only thing that you all need? Is food the only thing y'all need in modern society?
No, sir.
So good. So once they got the food down, Charles, then and only then could they develop all types of other stuff. Keep this in mind as we go forward. That's really important. The resources, and at the base level, food, but as we'll talk about, Charles, other resources came about later on. What do you think some of those resources are? Don't overthink it, but obviously you need food. What are some other things that you need? You, in 2021.
Well, water.
Yep.
Shelter.
Yep.
Heat. Like heat.
Good. So electricity is a human need that they did not need, 200 years ago. But we need that stuff today. What else?
Transportation.
Yep.
Well, since we're talking modern transportation, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Clothes.
Yes. Education, healthcare. Like, so the more and more things, again, the more that your society advances, in many ways, the more that your people need. But at these times, Stephen, the needs were very basic. But once they got the food source down, it's like, you know what? Let's see what else we can do. And once they begin to farm, this is where the populations also begin to increase, Stephen. Like I said before, so during the nomadic times where they were hunting and gathering, it might be a group of like 20 people. And this group, Stephen, would be pretty much, it might be like, you and your wife and kids, your brother's wife and kids, and like your parents. Like that would be the group. Maybe like one of y'all cousins or something like that. Like, so people would go in very small groups and they would travel pretty much like as a family unit. Now, Stephen has a farm and all types of people want to come from everywhere to live in and near this farm. And this is how we begin to develop our cities, where people didn't have to stay on the move. They could just stay in one place, which all human beings will love to be able to do. And slowly but surely, we begin to have some of these farming areas, Charles, begin to develop into cities. So I want you to see here, right? Like one of the things we talk about in social sciences, Stephen, is empiricism. Having some evidence for something, some objective evidence that you and I can see. So it's not enough. Like if I tell you that I got the chicken pox, there is some evidence that you and I can see that that's true. As opposed to telling me that it's cold or it's hot, I can tell you the exact temperature is 51 degrees today. I don't know that that's a temp. I haven't checked yet, but that's like we can use numbers in many cases to be able to see objective facts. But it's important that we not only look at these numbers, that we can explain things with these numbers. So for example, if we see that, we have 10 days in a row where the high temperature in Columbia, South Carolina is 20 degrees, it's just not enough for, like, we're not just gonna be thinking like, oh my God, like, it's really cold. People are going to begin to wonder, like, why is this happening? Like, this is abnormal. Like, okay, it's one thing for it to be cold like that one day. Why all of a sudden is it being cold like this so consistently? So when you look at these numbers, Charles, I also want you to think about the stories that they're telling. So we see in 1800, only 3% of the world lived in urban environments. 29% in 1950, 37% in 1975. And by 2050, it's going to be expected that 70% of all human beings live in urban environments. What stories do you think these numbers tell? Don't worry about if your answer is right or wrong, but why do you think we're seeing such a rapid increase?
Wait, I'm sorry, you was breaking up a little bit. Can you say the question again?
Why do you think there's been such a rapid increase in people living in urban environments? What stories do these numbers tell? Don't worry about a right or wrong answer.
Could it been go ahead, Stephen. Go ahead. You can go first. Could it be an increase in the demand for like foods like chicken and like eggs and certain things they receive from like farming, like from farms, and like they expand on land and like they clear that stuff out to make for more farms in a sense?
Potentially, like, I mean, I'll say this, your thinking is on the right track, but do you think that people are coming by 1975 and by 2050? Do you think that people are trying to come to New Orleans or Shirley or Nairobi or Cape Town for chicken?
No, sir.
I want to say better. I won't say I won't say housing, but probably better opportunities.
Yes, exactly. Good, Stephen. So so your take was on the right track, Charles, that the first reason why people became the first thing that people focus on is food and how they're going to eat. However, as we talked about, as these populations began to get more stable and grow more, there became other resources that became more important. So increasingly, Stephen, the cities are the sites in every country across the world of the most valued resources in the country. The most important resource today, it's not food itself, but what do you need to get food?
I was gonna say water, but then you said to get food.
Go ahead. I ain't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, what do you need to get food? Like, y'all got food today. What did y'all use to get it, motherfuckers?
We use monetary gain, like money. Yeah.
Yes, you did not. I hope you did not give nobody your car for no food. So you use money. Like, y'all be overthinking this stuff sometime, man. Like, I don't be trying to ask y'all trick questions. So make sure that y'all listen really carefully. So yes, you use money to get food, and jobs is what gives you the money. So people are coming to these urban environments because this is increasingly, Charles, where the jobs are. Other resources too, as we'll talk about, but increasingly, this is where the work is at. So 421 cities have a population of 1 million or more people. And that's a pretty sizable amount. But we also have some mega cities. This is a city of 10 million or more people. In 19, and again, one of the things you want to see, right, is how these things are increasing. Now, look, I told you, right, if all these people are coming to these cities for what reasons?
Food and opportunity.
Say it again.
Better living and opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. So they're coming. Yes, they're coming there for more jobs for sure. Absolutely. Do you think that everybody that comes is gonna get a job?
No.
Yeah. So I want you to also keep in mind some problems that may come for that. So you see people is coming to New York and stuff like that, the land of opportunity. It's a very expensive city to live in. Everybody ain't finna make it. So what may come of that?
People are gonna start to leave.
Maybe. Is it easy to leave?
No, not when you get there, because you're gonna need the funds to leave. So if you can't work, so could we potentially say that can lead to people potentially becoming poor, or
or committing crimes?
Both answers are correct. Yes. Because again, there's still you get there and you gotta, rent still gotta be paid, groceries still gotta be bought. But damn, I ain't got no job. So people are gonna do other things. And then the city has to respond to that as well. So this was not as big of a thing again in 1950, where you only had Tokyo and New York. reaching this population, but increasingly, we see this happening in countries all across the world. And Stephen, again, New York and Tokyo are in 2 to 3 richest countries in the world. Most of these mega cities are in very, very poor countries. What does a revolution mean again, gentlemen?
Change.
Yes.
Change.
So we have had 3 urban revolutions, 3 urban revolutions, 3 urban revolutions. Again, Stephen, I want you to take copious notes, but the most important thing is that you take time to understand what you're writing down. So make sure that you know that a revolution means change. So what this is speaking to is that the nature of urbanization, the nature of cities change at 3 important points in our history. I'll explain each of these in more detail in a moment as I allow you to catch up.
Dr. Muhammad.
Yes, sir.
Hey, just to mess around with Barry, if Barry needs extra credit, he definitely has to wear that Prescott jersey because the Titans definitely lost. So
I will wear it.
I said we'll get there, towards the end of the class. I think that Steve is going to be in a good enough position where he's not going to need a whole bunch of extra credit, but
just to mess with him though. Yeah,
but we will keep that in mind for sure. If it gets to that point.
Absolutely, go Titans. Yeah.
Hold on. Wait, well, hold on. Chuck, Dr. Muhammad, did y'all make the playoffs?
We did not.
Interesting.
Very interesting.
We could have won. Yeah, we could have made the playoffs just by winning 8 games, and they led like 23 teams in the playoffs this year. But no, we didn't get an invite.
I'm sorry. I can't relate because my team made it, but that's neither here nor there.
No doubt, it's all right. I think we'll be back strong next year.
Y'all said that. Yeah. Oh, y'all said that this year.
I didn't say that, but I try to be very pragmatic, but I do think some of the things that we need to do are kind of obvious at this point. So it's again, Jerry Jones is a wild card, so ain't no telling what this dude got to do. And I hate our head coach, but
he's an awful head coach.
But that's neither here nor there. So, all right, so revolution again speaks of change. The first occurred 10,000 years ago, where cities really began to formulate in Africa, to be clear, where again people began to develop and settle after millions of years of having to stay pretty much constantly on the move and being exposed to all types of really difficult terrains and environments. Human beings could finally begin to settle in one place. And this is through the advent of farming to be able to produce food. And once food was produced, this is where, Charles, you can begin to produce civilization. So one of the reasons why Egypt was able to emerge, and Egypt was far from the first and only African civilization. It's just one of the more prominent ones. But hopefully, if you've taken African civilizations with Dr. R. Rounds, you've been exposed to many others. But when we talk about civilization, what it speaks to is that you can develop other aspects of your culture, a term that I'm sure that you all have heard before in having classes with me, where in again, since Stephen, the first goal was to get food and water, almost everybody's focus during nomadic times had to be spent on just that. So that's where you had, like, there were two jobs in the first society. There were hunters and there were gatherers. Who did the hunting?
The men.
Who did the gathering?
The women.
Correct. So the division of labor that we see today, where men are expected to do more manual, hands-on type labor, and women do more domestic type of labor, that began from those processes millions of years ago. But once we began to get into farming, now, Charles, we can have more than two jobs. This is where, okay, I look, we're getting a lot of food over here, so that poor village over there, they may try and come take our food. So, Stephen, we need you to form a military to make sure that we're protected. We had a lot of people die during this really bad unexplained virus a couple years ago. So we want to prevent that kind of thing again. So Charles, maybe you can, like, be our village doctor. We need people that can teach the next generation of young people. We want it, like, again, we got all this food, we got this culture in place. We want to be able to, like, bridge the gaps for the next generation. So maybe this person will be a teacher. You know what? Like, look, we be working hard all day. We need some entertainment and stuff. So maybe this other person, they can be like our gesture, our clown. So, like, this is where you had, like, your first Chris Rocks and Cedric Entertainers and people like that, whose job it was to, like, entertain other people. But you can only have jobs like that when you got your bare necessities already straightened out. So as a result of this, and it could be, you can have people like, look, my job is, I'm going to sit over here and just write this poem. But to be able to do that, you got to have a whole bunch of resources that you need. So now that you get all these type of things, you can have, again, you can have a civilization. Like, you know what? We need to find some way to communicate, man. Like, we got more and more different types of people coming into this, like, into this village. We need to find some way to communicate with them. So let's create a universal language. Let's look. We had this meeting last week where we were going to trying to decide how to the best way to farm for this year, but I can't remember what, like, they said. So, like, look, let's try and find some way where we can record this, and this way you have the written word. The written word was just such an amazing invention that we take for granted, and why I get so hurt and disappointed when people don't read at times, Charles, because the written word itself was revolutionary, where we don't have to guess about what somebody said 3 weeks ago. We can see it on paper. If somebody had a really good idea about farming 100 years ago, Stephen, we don't have to reinvent that. But all these things could only happen once people had enough food. And that was a major revolution that changed the development of humanity greatly. And that first began to happen 10,000 years ago. Now, once you begin to have, like, so after a while, Stephen, many cities began to develop across the world. This is where, again, like, so places like New Amsterdam, which later became New York, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Boston. So by this time, like, London, Tokyo, Paris. So by this point in history, these were major areas where, like, a whole bunch of people had gathered. Not the most pleasant places during this time. Around 1800, another major change came to these cities, and this was the Industrial Revolution. So this is where, and again, make sure you follow me if I'm talking too fast or there's anything that you need to review. Please let me know. We can talk this out during office hours. And of course, the lecture is being recorded and will be available for you if you need to check it out again. But revolution again means what?
Change.
So with the agricultural revolution, Charles, it allowed it where people could produce a whole bunch of food in a predictable way that was very scientific, and that allowed us to be able to plan the rest of our lives. Again, much like, I'm talking about in 2021, that there are things that you probably want to do with your lives, but Stephen, once you get your money right, your mid to late 20s, you can really begin to plan. Like, okay, look, do I want to live in Tennessee, or do I want to live in Columbia, or do I want to live in this place? Do I want to live in an apartment, or am I ready to buy a house now? Do I want to buy a house that's already been used, or do I want to build a house from the ground? What kind of car do I want to get, and how much do I want to pay in my car note a month? Do I want to maybe start my own business now? Now that I'm pretty well set in my, in my career. So you can begin to plan those things out in your personal life, right? So the same thing holds true like for societies. Once you got your bare necessities met, you can really begin to plan, and doing that, you can do all types of great and big things. So with the agricultural revolution, it allowed them to do that for the first time in terms of producing food in a mass scale. The industrial, but this is a time, Charles, where they would be using like rakes, hoes and stuff like that, all types of hand tools. Like, so there would be a lot of manual labor. The Industrial Revolution, Stephen, changed all of that. The Industrial Revolution made it where now we could use machines to do a lot of this work for us. And how do y'all think that affected food production now that we can use machines?
It maximized. Yeah.
Say it again.
It basically sped up how fast food could be made and distributed.
For sure. I'm sorry, man. I just got a bad text, man. The great Hank Aaron died.
Oh yeah, I saw that on Twitter too.
That sucks.
I thought he'd been died, honestly.
No, he didn't. Yeah, that's a great loss there, Black people. So yes, Charles, you're absolutely right. You can produce food on a mass scale. You can do this really, really fast now. But what is that like? But say for example, but do you think, does everybody have access to the machines that allow you to produce food?
No.
Who's gonna have access to that?
I want to say I don't want to say rich people, but I guess the companies.
Yeah, you both are correct. Rich people, and the best organized collection of rich people is through corporations. So now, Stephen, if you're a corporation and you can afford all types of tractors, and you can produce chickens at a much faster rate than Charles could on his farm, where he's still using technology from 1750. Very quickly, Charles is probably going to go out of business. People are going to want your chickens more. You can produce them better. You can produce more of them. They probably can be a little bit bigger. So Charles is no longer able to really sustain himself by farming. What do you think Charles is going to have to do? Because he still needs food, right?
Mm-hmm.
But his farm is going out of business. What is he going to have to do?
Would I join his corporation?
Yes. You're going to have to leave your farm, close your farm down, and now you're going to have to go work for Stephen. But Stephen, he's going to pay you really good, fair wages, right? Hell no, Lee. Now you know how shady Stephen is, man. He ain't finna be looking out for the brothers. I'm just messing with you. I'm just finna mess with you, Stephen. But during that time, like the way that capitalism works is that you're probably not gonna be really getting your fair market value. And the Industrial Revolution really began to drive this forward, where during this time people were paid just really ridiculous wages, but they didn't have, and then you would have like little kids up in there and stuff like that, man, because at this stage, Stephen is looking for the cheapest workers possible. So if some 7-year-old kid is willing to do the work for like a fifth of what you asking for, Charles, he's going to hire that 7-year-old kid. And it may be possible that the kid, like he loses his arm in a machine or something like that, or maybe he gets gets pneumonia because the factory's too cold. That ain't Stephen's problem. He ain't got to worry about all that. Do you want this job or not, little kid? You can go back on your farm and starve if you want to.
It kind of doesn't give you a choice in a sense. Would you say?
Say it again.
Like going off of like what you're saying, like it kind of basically either forces like if I was an example of that farmer, it would either force me to go work for Stephen or I just go out of business and I starve to death, basically.
Yeah, pretty much. But there's one more option.
Mm-hmm.
Say it again.
Oh, you said there's one more option?
Yes.
You want to hear?
You could go work for this person, you could starve, or you could do one more thing.
I was gonna say steal.
Say it again, Stephen.
I was gonna say like you can steal.
Commit crime. That's the other option that many people also took on. So one of the things that I want you to make note here, though, Charles, in making that point about how your options and choices are limited, is that when we talk about this Industrial Revolution, it says here that it occurred in 1800 in England, in Germany, France, and America. Is that the entire world?
No, sir, it's not.
So one of the things that you also want to make keen note of, and please make sure that you hear me here, is that almost everybody has experienced an industrial revolution to this point, but not everybody experienced it at the same time. So the countries now that have experienced it have been places like, in Asia, such as China, the Philippines, Taiwan, places in Africa, India. So in this way, right? Like, so during this time, right, in the Industrial Revolution in America and in Western Europe, this is where the cities really began to explode in population. So all types of people start to come to New York, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, Philadelphia, London, Paris, Munich, Berlin, and they came here because this is where the jobs were. Again, we talked about the driver of food and basic resources for survival have always been a population drivers. So, I mean, hell, so many people began to come to America because the cities of Europe, they were starving out there. So people were leaving, like, London and Berlin and Paris and Rome and places like that, because they weren't able to compete in those cities. So this is how so many of our cities became populated. As we get deeper into the 1800s and Black people got out of slavery, and there were not only, again, was there racial strife here, the economy was not as sound and as productive for Black people coming out of slavery. So that's why you had the Great Migration, which I'm sure that you've heard about in other classes, where you had like all these Black people. Again, everybody from Chicago, man, like is effectively from the South, like, because all of our parents and grandparents is from Alabama, from Mississippi, from Georgia. In fact, you can draw straight lines in terms of a lot of people from like the Carolinas and Virginia. They migrated south and they went into like DC and Philadelphia and Newark and New York and places like that. Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, they went to like Chicago, St. Louis, Detroit. You would have people like, coming from like, Texas and Arkansas, going out to LA and stuff. So all of that stuff though was like, people coming for the jobs. My father, again, coming from Alabama, would talk about how they, when they came up there back in the 60s, they could like, find a job, lose one, go a couple of blocks and find one again. That economy does not exist as much anymore. We'll talk about that later on as we go through the class. But people were coming through these major cities to find work during this time. As we got into the third revolution, though, Charles, there's more and more of an urbanization of non-Western society. So like I talked about, this originally happened in France, Germany, places like that. The third revolution began to happen in the 20th century in places like China and Africa and India. And this is where they had their industrial revolution. So one of the things that, I'm sure you've heard about is outsourcing, where almost everything, like if almost everything in your rooms, if you look at it, it's probably been made outside of this country. And it's made in major cities in Asia, where people are coming and flooding the market and trying to get jobs so that they can make you some Air Jordans, they can make an iPhone, they can make, your plasma screen TV, where all that stuff is being made. As we talked about, Stephen, one of the reasons why they're doing that is because they can pay them much lower wages. Again, like today, if you know what an iPhone costs, you're probably not going to sign up for a job where, you're making like $1 a day to be making iPhones. You're not going to be making like, $2.15 a week to be making Jordans. But as you talked about before, Charles, if the country is really poor and you got a lot of people who don't have no work, people have the option where they either can starve or they can go make them Air Jordans. So the third, but again, as we talked about before, in a city like, Shanghai, is everybody going to find a job that comes there?
No, sir.
So that's going to create some bigger problems. And a lot of the, like, in America, we got, 300 million people. In China, it's 1 billion people, dog. Right. So what's going to happen in some of those cities?
either they'll be forced to like work in like small like jobs, like like restaurants and stuff, or going to the military if they can't.
Incorrect. They're gonna
No?
die and starve.
Oh,
Like
no.
there's a reason. There's a reason, for example, right? Like China has a ban on how many children you can have. People
Right,
look at that as being like, oh my God, how draconian, how barbaric. But as we talked about, Charles, like again, in the nomadic period, people had small families because they didn't know if they were going to be able to feed their children. If they allowed people just, to have unlimited children, even more people would starve and die.
That's right.
In America, it's self-corrected where a lot of our parents and grandparents came from really big families, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 kids.
More than that.
Right. That don't happen that much no more, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because people do not have enough resources to be feeding 13, 15 kids in modern America.
Absolutely.
Yeah, even if you make good money, that's going to be like, pretty tough. So very quickly, the world's top populated cities in 1950, and I want you to see the different patterns here, right? And keep in mind what we talked about before, Stephen, about how seeing these things connected together. And we talked about the Second Industrial Revolution. It brought a lot of people to the western cities of the United States, Germany, France, and America. So this is where in 1950, most of the world's most populated cities were western cities. London, England, Paris, France, Moscow, Russia.
You said it's 5. I got London, Paris, Moscow. And what were the other 2?
As in Germany. Can you see the screen?
Oh, I'm sorry. My fault. I had it on you and Barry. Okay, there you go.
And these are not all of them, but just an example of where they were. The main thing I want you to look at is where they were placed. These were European cities and American cities.
Gotcha.
But when we get to 2000, you see a lot more diversity here. India, China, Bangladesh, Pakistan. And keep in mind, right, like the Industrial Revolution, like the cities that people were coming to in the 1800s and 1900s, like it ain't like going to New York or Philadelphia or New Orleans today. Like these cities were really some messed up places, really dirty, a lot of lawlessness, a lot of disease. And this is in a very rich country of the United States. These countries often do not have nearly the national wealth that America does. So it makes it where a lot of these people are left to their own devices in these cities. One of the things I think you all mentioned before was shelter. So we talked about before, Stephen, not only is there not enough jobs for a lot of these people, it ain't enough health care, there's not enough seats in classrooms. In very many cases, particularly in places like India and China, there's not nearly enough housing. If you travel abroad, and I have no doubt that both of you will have many opportunities to do this as you advance through your time as scholars and then your subsequent careers and just your social activity. If you, one of the things you see oftentimes is like these kind of like little makeshift shanty towns where people like, so almost like, when I was growing up as shorties, like we might take like, loose plywood and like make clubhouses and stuff sometimes. It'd be people in foreign countries that come to these cities, can't find jobs, can't find housing, and do stuff like that. I know, like, I was in some of those when I was in Cape Town, and you'll be amazed at the ingenuity of people. Like, I've seen some people really fix their stuff up, like, to look really nice. Like, it was amazing. Like, one cat I saw, like, one time actually had some cable somehow, dog. True story. So again, like, you know, we see more and more how the rest of the world is catching up, and we see more of these cities outside of the United States. But the question becomes, Stephen, do they have the resources to support all those people? We'll leave it there for now. We're going to begin Monday's lecture talking about a few different concepts. Like whenever you prepare for the midterm exam or any pop quizzes that might be coming up, I want you to always pay keen attention to concepts that are written in italics. Oops, I'm sorry. So I'm going to begin Monday's class with these concepts of urbanization, urban growth, urban transition, and urbanism. But make a trip to the library this weekend and try and really labor to get up to speed on these concepts so that we can have a coherent discussion about them on Monday.
Yes, sir.
I'll leave this up for just a moment. And again, like I said, this will be recorded for you. And I'll send you the link where you can see all of our lectures going forward. Are there any questions or comments before we leave for the day?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead. My fault, Stephen.
I stay over here at the apartment, so I'm not gonna be able to have any modes of transportation to get to the library.
Hey, Stephen, what I can do, because I still live on campus, whenever I go to the book, I'm going to write down like some of the stuff that I read out in chapters, but I can take pictures and I can send it to your phone since I have your number, and I can send it to you and we can go accordingly like that. And then, you know, when you come here on the weekdays, we can go to the library in the afternoon before you go back home.
I got you. Thank you.
That would be very helpful. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
And yeah, so keep me posted if either of you have any troubles at all with the text or any aspect of the course, and we'll move forward accordingly. All right, gentlemen, y'all have a great weekend.
All right, go Cowboys.